Imagine this. Your morning starts out totally normal, but by the end of the day, the whole world is teetering on the edge of a massive war. That's exactly what we're diving into today. We're going to walk through a really detailed, hypothetical scenario of how a conflict in the Middle East could just explode overnight. This is all based on some pretty deep analysis of the region, so let's get right into it.
And it all kicks off on a really personal level. I mean, check out this quote. One minute, you're on a family vacation in Dubai. The next, you're literally watching a war start right from your hotel window. This personal story is how we get pulled into a crisis that just spirals out of control so fast that it catches everyone off guard, from tourists on the ground to leaders around the world.
And just like that, everything changes. In one single moment, that familiar world of travel, of business, of just being on vacation, it all just evaporates. And what's left? Pure chaos.
Okay, so our first section here is called A War's Personal Beginning, and the subtitle says it all, from a morning flight to a regional firestorm. This is all about that initial shockwave. We're not talking about distant armies or big political speeches yet. Nope, this is about that immediate, terrifying feeling of being caught right in the middle of it all.
And you just have to see how fast a global hub like Dubai gets completely paralyzed. I mean, think about it. The airport is being evacuated. There's smoke everywhere. You've got drones being shot down right near the Burj Khalifa, of all places. Debris from missiles is starting fires on the ground. Of course, all flights are canceled. And suddenly, families are split up, totally stranded, with no idea when or how they're getting home. It's a total, sudden shutdown.
All right, so from that chaos on the ground, let's zoom out. Let's look at the bigger picture and see how this thing snowballs from a localized crisis into a full-blown regional war. This is where the major powers start making their moves.
And here it is. The first major military response is announced. Operation Epic Fury. U.S. and Israeli officials make it crystal clear. This is not just some one-and-done strike. Oh no, this is a sustained campaign that's designed to last for days, targeting infrastructure all across Iran.
And then, wow, we get what is probably the most stunning development of all. Iranian state TV actually confirms it. A strike has hit the supreme leader's compound, and Ayatollah Khamenei has been killed. This is a massive, absolutely game-changing event.
And you have to understand, this was no accident. This quote on screen, which the source material attributes to former President Trump, it really lays out the core strategy here. It's what's called a decapitation strike. The goal was to eliminate Iran's entire leadership all in one go.
So you can bet Iran's response is swift and it is widespread. They launched their own operation, Operation True Promise 4, and they claim to have hit 27 different U.S. military bases all across the Middle East. So this isn't some small, limited counterattack. This is an all-out retaliation.
Now, this chart really shows you the sheer intensity of what's happening. We're talking over 1,000 missiles fired at the UAE alone. Just think about that number. But then, look at the other number, the interception rate. They stopped almost every single one. And that tells you two things, right? First, the scale of the assault is just massive. And second, the effectiveness of modern air defense is absolutely incredible.
Okay, so with an attack this huge, you might be thinking, well, Iran's got to just crumble, right? But that's not what happens. Not at all. So let's dig into why. Why is Iran so historically difficult to conquer? The answer? It's basically a natural fortress. I mean, just look at these natural defenses. You've got the Zagros Mountains in the south and west, the Albers in the north. These are like massive, near-impenetrable walls. And where you don't have mountains, you've got these vast, brutal deserts like the Dasht Kavir or huge marshlands. For centuries, this very geography has just chewed up and spit out invading armies. All of this geography gives Iran a huge advantage called strategic depth. Here's what that means. The deeper an invading army pushes into the country, the weaker it gets. Their supply lines get stretched out for miles and miles, making them super vulnerable to attack. And all that time, the defenders can regroup and hit back. It's a military challenge that has frustrated invaders for thousands of years. The land itself literally becomes a weapon. And it's not just the land. Internally, Iran is incredibly diverse. I mean, it's a mix of so many different ethnic groups: Persians, Azeris, Kurds, Arabs. Now, you might think that would be a source of weakness, right? Lots of internal tension. But history has shown something really interesting. When Iran is faced with a foreign invader, these groups often unite under a single banner of nationalism. And that makes the country even harder to occupy.
All right, now let's talk about Iran's most powerful weapon. And it's not a missile, it's not a tank, It's a tiny strip of water that the entire global economy absolutely depends on.
Okay, so here's the key strategic advantage for Iran. Take a look. They control the entire northern coast of the Persian Gulf. Meanwhile, the southern coast is shared by 7 different countries. This geographic reality gives Tehran a completely dominant position over the one-way in and out, the Strait of Hormuz.
And why does that little strait matter so much? Well, because a fifth, 20% of the entire world's oil supply passes through that narrow choke point every single day. And in this scenario we're exploring, Iran has just announced they're closing it. The economic fallout is immediate and it is catastrophic.
For a major country like India, for example, which gets over half of its crude oil through that strait, this is what's being called a nightmare scenario. And you can see why. The ripple effects would be huge. Fuel prices would skyrocket, you'd see massive inflation, immense pressure on their currency. It really shows how a regional conflict like this instantly becomes a global economic crisis for everyone.
So, the stated goal of Operation Epic Fury was to bring peace and democracy to Iran. But as we get into our final section here, you really have to ask, does history suggest that's actually going to be the outcome?
You know, the timing of this whole thing is, well, it's pretty telling. Look at the sequence of events. The attack comes after massive anti-government protests were already happening inside Iran. But it also happens just one day after an Omani minister claimed a peace deal between the US and Iran was, quote, within reach. That stark contrast really suggests the military strike was planned way in advance, no matter what was happening with diplomacy.
And here's the problem. We've seen this script play out before, haven't we? You look at Iraq in 2003 or Libya in 2011, the stated goals were always noble: remove a dictator, protect civilians. But the reality on the ground, it wasn't stability. The reality was a complete collapse of the state, which created this huge power vacuum. And that unleashed decades of civil war, instability, and it actually fueled the rise of new extremist groups who thrive in that kind of chaos.
Which, of course, brings us to the central question of this whole scenario. If you forcibly remove the regime in a country as large, as complex, and as naturally fortified as Iran, is that really going to lead to the intended outcome of peace and stability?
And this final quote, again attributed to Trump in the source material, it just perfectly captures the core assumption behind the whole intervention. The message to the Iranian people is basically, when we are finished, you guys take over your government. The idea is that after the bombing stops, the people on the ground will just step up and build a new, friendly democracy. But as we've seen, history often tells a very different story. And so that leaves us with one last, really sobering question. When you shatter a nation's government, when you break a country, who is actually left to pick up the pieces? Is it the peaceful Democrats that you hoped for, or is it someone else entirely?